Bismillah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Today we're speaking about mental health in Ramadan. I was actually asked to speak on this subject in Dutch for a group, and I figured out might as well just translate the slides and do it in English as well. So the main question is, how does Ramadan affect our mental health? And mostly, why do my symptoms get worse? So, since the beginning of school, we've been taught to introduce ourselves, which is usually the part that I skip or forget when I'm giving a presentation. But this time around, I figured might as well introduce myself more than I usually do. So I was asked by a friend to speak about religious trauma. And she knows me, so she said, "Why don't you tell your personal story in the beginning about how you came on this path as a psychologist?" And I think it's actually a story that is telling about me. So it was I was 12 years old and I was staying at my aunt's house back when we didn't have constant internet, smartphones, etc. And she had to go do groceries, and she knew that I would be waiting about half an hour alone in her home. So she gave me a book and she said that I'd probably like it. It was Ellen and Barbara Pease's work on body language, nonverbal communication, neurological differences in men and women, etc. And she was absolutely right. I loved the book. I took it home without asking. Then I remember I had it under my pillow, even though it was quite a thick book, and I would only allow myself to read a little bit each night because I thought I'd never find anything as interesting ever again. So once I finished that book, I decided to go to the library and read all of their other, I think they have about 12 or 14 books. So then I finished all of them, and then I was kind of in some sort of existential crisis. What do I do now? But then I realized there was a whole psychology section, and I might as well get out of my comfort zone and try other authors and other subjects. And I found them to be equally, if not more interesting. And that's kind of how my journey started. I've been reading ever since. I also kind of realized that I had an earlier and even earlier passion than this book, and it was when I was about 7. And my dad gave me a book. It's in Dutch. It's called "I Want to Know About Earth," and it had like all these science facts, like why does gravity work? How many moons does this planet have? Why does the Earth spin? What creates day and night? And I remember I wanted to memorize the book. Like, actually, I wanted to memorize the book. I was so encapsulated. I remember that I had a notebook and I tried to write down, I copied the book so that I would memorize it. So, yeah, and then eventually, of course, I studied applied psychology. Later, I studied clinical neuropsychology at Leiden University in Leiden, the Netherlands. And yeah, that's it. I don't like talking about myself. So my methodology, I always have to put up this warning because my talking is kind of layered, and I don't like to give an answer straight away. I like at the end of every single presentation I give for everything to come together naturally. So you really have to pay attention, even though I use kind of fun and childish icons and pictures. You have to pay attention, um, and don't be distracted. It's also helpful to take notes. You really have to pay attention to follow and keep up with everything. Then, oops, sorry, questions at the end, but this is not a live session, so we'll figure out how to solve that. Three topics that I'm going to discuss today: the Quran, which is incredibly tied to the month of Ramadan, fasting, and the rest of the acts of worship that we we strive to increase in Ramadan. So I wanted to start with the Quran because I was asked to give this lecture to sisters, and sisters, there's always people who aren't able to fast because of breastfeeding or pregnancy, and there's of course always sick and elder. So not everyone can fast, but hopefully, inshallah, everyone can put the Quran at the center of Ramadan. شهر رمضان الذي أنزل فيه القرآن, the month of Ramadan in which was revealed the Quran. I try to always use the translation by Taqiyuddin al-Hilali and Muhsin Khan. So all my translations are by them. They are the most reliable and most recommended translator. But yeah, the Quran was revealed first in Ramadan, and these are things that most Muslims know, but we don't really let it sink in what that means and how big of a part of Ramadan the Quran is. So when it comes to science and the unseen, I speak mostly from a scientific perspective. And there's a lot of misunderstandings about science, especially in the Islamic community. Well, okay, I'm lying. It's everywhere. The misunderstanding of science is everywhere. The core of science is to investigate um, things that can be measured, calculated, seen. We have empirical science, which means it can be observed, it can be proven. And then we have theoretical science, which is more mathematical, based on formulas, things that we can prove by calculations, even though maybe we may not be able to see them, for example, gravity. Um, so when it comes to the unseen and the immeasurable, science does not report on it. It doesn't. It is outside the realm of science. It doesn't mean that it is denied. So, for example, a lot of people will randomly say that science does not. What's the word? Science does not. Um, 1 second, I have to look for the translation. Recognize, that's it. Didn't even have to use it. Science does not recognize the soul, and this is not true. Science does not speak about the soul because it's outside of the realm of science. So the thing that I'm going to talk about most, my profession, is about things that we can measure and calculate and observe. So I wanted to share this verse from the Quran, one of my favorite. وَيَسْأَلُونَكَ عَنِ الرُّوحِ. This was when the people came to the Prophet and asked him about the soul. These were mostly the Jews and the Christians who had the soul in their books, and they needed confirmation to see if this was a true prophet. قُلِ الرُّوحُ مِنْ أَمْرِ رَبِّي. So the Prophet was ordered to reply, the soul is one of the orders from God. وَمَا أُوتِيتُم مِّنَ الْعِلْمِ إِلَّا قَلِيلًا. And this is the important thing to highlight. People have not received a lot of knowledge, barely anything. If I were to translate it freely, I would say إِلَّا قَلِيلًا, just a little bit, a very, very, very tiny fraction of all the things that is out there has been revealed to us or are observable and measurable. So my background is in neuropsychology, and when I was asked to speak about why mental health worsens in Ramadan, I was a little conflicted because in Islam we have the heart at the center of all and not the brain. And also, even though my background is more scientific, Islam is mostly about the unknown and the unseen. So one of the proofs that the heart is at the core of intelligence in Islam, we relate intelligence to the heart, is this verse where it is asked, have they not traveled through the land, and have they hearts wherewith to understand, and ears wherewith to hear? Verily, it is not the eyes that grow blind, but it is the heart which are in the breast that grow blind. And I remember reading this for the first time when I was about 16. And it was at the time that thought, we were taught in school that the heart, it just has one task, and that's to pump around blood. It's just a muscle, and that's it. And then this verse, it was really fascinating to me, because I would have thought it was figuratively if it didn't immediately mention ears and hearing, which are literally tied together. So I thought at the time it must mean that the heart is also literally tied to understanding. But, I was 16. I did not know how to dig into it, how to look into it. Um, let's see what we have. Okay, so then when I was at uni and I was able to understand Islamic sources correctly and understand that it was indeed the heart where we believe the intellect is, and that the heart is at the center, I started to learn that this is also existing in a scientific perspective. So it means that this is measurable and observable. And I want to explain that. But first, I have to speak about the nervous system. This is the vagus nerve, which is a really important nerve. It goes all the way from the bottom of the brain. It connects the brain to the heart, lungs, and the intestines. Also, sorry, I sometimes I have to dig for words in English, sometimes I have to dig for words in Dutch. All my languages are dying. Yes, so the vagus nerve, it connects basically the entire body. And this is the neurology is not just about the brain. It's the brain, and I forgot the name of this in English, but you know what I'm talking about. Okay, so there is two parts to the nervous system. Let's start with the activating part. It's called the sympathetic nervous system. This is the part of the nervous system that is associated with arousal. So, if you're busy, if you're doing something intense, you're carrying heavy groceries, you're at a amusement park, in a roller coaster, this is what activates the parasympathetic nervous system. Also, of course, stress activates it. The if the parasympathetic nervous if the sympathetic nervous system is activated, it has its own um, it's tied to basically all of our organs. So the eyes will constrict, for example, the pupils, your heartbeat will rise, cortisol will rise, your lungs will constrict, making it a little difficult to breathe. Blood pressure will rise, stress hormone, adrenaline, etc. So this is the sympathetic nervous system, again associated to activity and arousal. Then the second part of the nervous system is the parasympathetic nervous system. A trick I was learned to remember these is that para, it comes from, I don't know, Greek or Latin, whatever, and it means to halt. So this is the halting, the nervous system that is pressing on your brake. And I put a nice, like, Zen, calming breathing thing, um, which shows that this is the nervous system that is activated when you are at peace, when you feel safe, when you feel calm, when you're relaxing. It does basically the opposite. Blood pressure lowers, heartbeat lowers, um, the lung, how do you say that? Deconstricts. I don't know. You can breathe more easy. Cortisol is decreased, less stress hormone, more serotonin and dopamine, which make you feel satisfied, happy, relaxed, grateful, etc. And of course, the most important part is cell repair. It not just cell repair. This is uh, it is the mode that we're in that repairs our entire body. So if this one is associated with activity and arousal, then this one I would say is associated with rest and repair. And they need to be balanced. But for most people, at the core of a lot of mental health issues is a disbalance. And the problem is that this used to be activated when we had like intense physical strain, sometimes when there was danger. Now it is chronically activated. For example, if you have a narcissistic boss, problematic relationship, you have mental stress from work, etc., then this will basically activate chronically, even though there is no real danger or necessity for it. So then they did a study on what happens if people try to experience positive emotions. And they noticed that it created this thing that they call coherence in the body, which means that, well, it means that basically everything is nice and coherent. And then here, if there is negative emotions, and I will come to explain what causes this to happen. If there is negative emotions, then we have incoherence, or as I like to call it, chaos. There's chaos in the body or disorder. Yeah, that's a tiny little stupid pun that I will mostly laugh about on my own. Okay, moving on. This coherence, it shows in the entire body, in all systems, not just in the heartbeat. It shows in the entire body. And also remember this part, it will come back. Quick coherence. In the study, they gave the participants, I think, 30 seconds to calm down, to do breathing exercises, to think about positive things. And then this was in a book about the heart's intelligence, but I basically don't remember what I wanted to say about it, so we're just going to skip it. So, if you know me, if you've heard me earlier, if you've had a session with me, you know that I'm always yapping about neuroplasticity, which means, let me first start at what is neuroplasticity. It's the brain's ability to adapt in structure and functionality, which means it's like a muscle. That's the comparison that I often use. What you use grows. What you don't use, you lose. I was thinking about a pun that my professor used to say, but I don't remember. So now I ruined the whole thing. I think it was just use it or lose it or something. But okay, I'm forgetting about my professor. The thing that I wanted to say, structures that you use will grow in size. They will have more connectivity, which means they get activated easier. Structures that you don't use, they shrink, they degenerate. It's kind of like they are eaten up. Okay, so you see, I didn't even have to use my professor slogan. I'm always talking about neuroplasticity, but now here I would need like a drum sound for increase of tension. But the heart also has neuroplasticity. Um, so I wrote the sources down at the bottom. The heart is also neuroplastic. It can also adapt. Even more so, the brain has memory, and I've shared a very interesting study. I will put it in the link below where you can download the handout. There was a study where they investigated people that received a heart from a donor. And in multiple cases, they found that the person who received the heart also received personality traits, favorite foods, likes, dislikes, certain memories, certain behavior. And as the scientists who were on the study said, it could not be explained by medication, psychology. There was no explanation other than it came with the heart. Very, very interesting. Extremely extraordinary interesting. I definitely recommend to read through the cases. So the heart has memory. Then the heart is it can make autonomous. Is that how you pronounce the word? It can make autonomous decisions, just like the brain. It can make decisions. Think about that. The heart can make decisions separately on its own. And what was this about again? Oh, yeah. This was about tasks and orders and communication. So, what they discovered, and I recommend to look at Heart Math Institute, or don't, by the way. I don't know. People are probably going to complain if they spread some, I don't know, new age stuff. But anyway, I read their studies on the heart, and they are the ones who are most interested in neurocardiology. That's the scientific name. I'm drifting. Okay, so the heart, it can communicate with other organs through blood pressure, through the hormonal system, through its heartbeats, so sound waves, and also through electromagnetic waves. There's probably some more methods that the heart can use to communicate with other organs, but I don't remember them all. So the important thing to realize is that the heart is more in charge of the body than the brain is. So as they have studied, they found out that the heart can decline a order, so to say, from the brain, but the brain cannot decline an order from the heart. What are these orders? Basically signals that there is danger or that there isn't danger. And let's say the heart signals that something is wrong, but the brain cannot figure out. The brain's like, I don't know. This person isn't as sus as you say he is. Sorry. Then the brain cannot decline. So it will eventually create uh, stress hormones, negative thoughts about this person. I don't know exactly what the response is, but they did figure out that the heart can decline an order from the brain, and the brain cannot decline an order from the heart. And there is also constant communication between the heart and the brain, and also between the heart and other organs. One of the authors of this study, he described the heart as basically the global manager of the body. That picture wasn't supposed to be there. Or as Sheikh Saleh Al Fawzan says, the heart is the king of the body. So I showed the picture of the vagus nerve earlier, and this time I've added a heart just to show you how wired, how connected the vagus nerve truly is to the heart. There was a study done on war veterans that had severe PTSD, where they injected a steroid which numbs the vagus nerve. It makes it numb, so that's kind of the same as calming it down into the neck. And then the family members of the war veterans reported that their whole personality came back. And the problem was that this person, they've had PTSD for years and years and years on end. And if you have PTSD, it changes your personality because the brain is also changed. So they become like cynical, they become aggressive, they can have anger outbursts, they cannot enjoy their loved ones. They basically everything nice about being human is shut down with PTSD. And it immediately disappeared after they injected the vagus nerve with steroid. Steroid also enhances and quickens healing. So it could also have to do with restoration. But I'm going back and forth again. Sorry, but they reported that they were happy again and they could make jokes again, and basically their old self was back. So another thing that I did not want to go too deep in, as it's kind of a complex subject that I am often afraid to touch. But before I start summarizing my point, um, this is from Ibn al-Qayyim's work. So someone has summarized lots of his work into a book called 100 Pieces of Advice by Ibn al-Qayyim. One of these chapters is about the covering of the heart. I've added it into the handout. Just check the bottom of the YouTube page and then just please read it for yourself. But to summarize, Ibn Qayyim, he writes about how, the heart is where the aql is in Islam. And he writes about how there is different kinds of covers on that heart, which the thicker the cover, the less knowledge and inspiration from Allah can enter the heart. He also writes that inspiration can directly enter the heart of a believer. So that means that Allah can put insights into our heart. The thickest layer, he describes 10, and then I'll just do the thickest and then the thinnest. All those 10 you'd have to read for yourself. The thickest layer is the cover, and this comes from denying Allah and denying the reality and the rights of Allah upon us. So this is, denying is different from being ignorant. This this is about kufr. This is the khatam of kufr, the cover of kufr. Sorry. Switching languages again. And then the thinnest layer is a shadow. And this is based on the hadith or the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He said, I feel shaded in my heart, and therefore I made istighfar. I asked Allah for forgiveness, because forgiveness, it also, asking Allah for forgiveness, sorry, it also cleanses the heart. And this was the very thinnest of layers that only prophets have. And then after the prophet, the next thinnest layers, of course, the Salihin, the Sahaba, the best people after the prophets. As the Prophet, peace be upon him, has said, verily in the body there is a piece of flesh. If it is sound, the whole body is sound. If it is corrupt, the whole body is corrupt. Verily it is the heart. So this brings us back to this picture. The heart is the king of the body indeed. I'm not going to read this in Arabic, sorry. I can't even pronounce English anymore. O mankind, there has come to you a good advice from your Lord, and a healing for that which is in your breast, a guidance and a mercy for the believers. See, I can't even read in English. Washifa lima fi sudur. The Quran is a healing for the hearts. So coming back to the scientific benefits of reading Quran, contemplating Quran, reciting Quran, listening to Quran are these. It activates the vagus nerve in a good way. I once read a study that, okay, so it's been established that, for example, if you gargle water, it activates the vagus nerve. So um, it can awaken, it's kind of a weird word to use, but it can awaken the parasympathetic nervous system. You know, the blue one that is associated with rest and repair. And then I also read a study that Arabic throat letters, you know, the hain and the ha that we frighten the people with, and the ha that no one can pronounce, that they also activate the vagus nerve. But I could not for the life of me find it anymore. I asked around, I looked around, not even ChatGPT could find it. So if ChatGPT can find it, then I'm helpless basically. So just take it with a grain of salt. Maybe someone has it. Please put it in the comments. I do remember reading it. The second is increase in alpha brainwave, which induces relaxation, also parasympathetic nervous system activation. It's good for the memory. And oh, yeah, this is why I mentioned earlier it works super fast. So, this is the picture where I mentioned quick coherence. Where you can calm down the body really fast. You can put the body into coherence, so order, really quickly. And the Quran has been studied to have a profoundly quick effect on doing so. Something I wanted to say here, but I don't remember. What was it again? Short term effects, anyway. Maybe I'll remember. Long term effects. It improves brain connectivity, which is linked to intelligence. So I think I might draw to the conclusion that the Quran makes you smarter. Most definitely, if it heals the heart, and the heart is where the aql, it would translate to intelligence roughly, to intellect. I think intellect is a better translation. It strengthens the memory. It trains the short term and long term memory. Working memory is just another word for short term memory. It reduces depression and anxiety. It stabilizes dopamine and serotonin. I will think I'll mention dopamine and serotonin uh, if I don't wind up talking too much, because I can talk a lot. Nervous system balance, basically coherence. So now we're going to talk about fasting. And this is the main reason why the symptoms increase, worsen in the beginning of Ramadan. I'll go through this more quickly. There's fewer distractions and there's a break in your routine. These alone, even without fasting, can cause an increase in symptoms. For example, normally you wake up and you have breakfast, and in Ramadan, we wake up and especially the first day, it's difficult. Dopamine fluctuates. Maybe this, I'll start about dopamine. Okay, so for those of you that have already heard me talk about dopamine a lot, I suggest you skip a few minutes. I'll try to keep it short. Dopamine is the hormone that we call the reward hormone. It rewards us for tasks that we're supposed to do often, so it feels enjoyable. But the problem nowadays is that with technology gives us high doses, very frequent releases of dopamine. So, for example, every time you get a notification or an app, your brain creates dopamine. And this is not something that we can just decide to turn off. That's how the brain works, and it's always how it will work. So imagine how many dopamine shots, boosts we get in a day. If we read our emails, if we check our WhatsApp, if we check our notifications on social media, basically throughout the entire day. And every time we scroll, it also activates the reward system, which damages our reward system, which is why people struggle with motivation a lot. Because normally, if you did the dishes, your brain would release dopamine and you'd feel happy. You'd feel, that sense of accomplishment. You feel good about finishing the task. But now your brain thinks, why would I do the dishes if I can just open my phone and get like 3 times the dose of dopamine that I get if I do the dishes. Dopamine is also very tied to mental health issues. Yeah, dopamine, we also get it from eating food. So that is, of course, the main cause of lack of dopamine is the lack of food. We also have less sugar, we have less caffeine. They are all tied to dopamine and to cortisol, the stress hormone. Stress hormone increases when you fast. Okay, then we have, yes, kind of mentioned it here. You can have issues with blood sugar for the first day. Then eventually, after a few days of fasting, I think if I remember correctly, this can happen within 12 to 24 hours for some people, depending on how good your health is. But the brain will switch from using sugar as energy. By the way, the brain needs sugar as energy, and it prefers sugar as energy. So this is why you get brain fog and confusion and headaches for the first days. So your body will then eventually switch from system, and it will use fats as energy. And if you think about sugar and fats as an energy fuel, then you could compare sugar to like gas. So imagine you want to light a fire and you use a lighter, and you can use fats. You can compare fats, sorry, to an oil lamp. It can burn for really, 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 really long, whereas a gas lighter will run out very quickly. So sugar is fast energy and fat is more slow and sustainable energy. So this is really good for your brain. Uh, then then we start to feel better. Serotonin rises and cortisol decreases. Yeah, basically this you can read it. So such a bad presentator, I don't know. Long term, it stabilizes your cortisol. It makes us more sensitive to serotonin, which again is the happy hormone, the good happy hormone. Dopamine is less sustainable. We need dopamine, but it's more of an intense energy boost that we can. It's I don't know, kind of compare it to drugs. Dopamine is comparable to drugs. It's intense, but then afterwards the body gets drained. And serotonin, I would compare serotonin more to uh, sustainable sources of joy, feeling at peace, feeling safe. You can feel those emotions all the time. There's never too much feeling safe. Or maybe there is, I don't know, I'm going too deep again. Increased neuroplasticity. Yeah, you can read this. I think just I'll go through it. Otherwise, it's going to be long, sorry. Okay, so then this is more long term benefits. Just, I don't know, take a picture, read it. Um, yeah, okay, kind of a switch in subject. Ramadan is not just about abstaining from food. It's about abstaining from all bad things, from gossiping, from wasting time, from being lazy, from having evil thoughts, from anger, from desires, from hedonism, etc. And this in turn is really good for the prefrontal cortex. The prefrontal cortex is the part of the brain that is responsible for basically every complex function that we have: decision making, um, what are complex function, reflecting, insight, self-reflection. um, People that have issues with their prefrontal cortex, whether it's inactive or it has shrunk or they're missing parts, they usually struggle with empathy, with impulsivity. So self-constraint is tied to the prefrontal cortex, with lying, because lying is difficult. It's a complex thing. You have to put in effort to lie, and you don't have to put in effort to speak the truth. So the frontal cortex makes up the lies and then also is tied to deciding if the lie is said or if we restrain ourselves. So, good prefrontal cortex is really good for us. It's also the part of the brain that is um, finished the latest between 25 to 30 years of age. The prefrontal cortex is basically, I've just got mine and I still doing a bad job at this. I don't even remember what I was saying. All right. See, this is what I hate about speaking in English. For some reason, when I speak in English, my personality comes out. And then when I speak in Dutch, I'm like more, more, how do you say zakelijk in English? I'm more, what's the opposite of casual? I'm less casual. Okay, so the last topic, oh, I actually did a really good job time-wise. The last topic is focus and seclusion. Okay, sorry, I'm going to be serious again. But one of the important things of Ramadan is that we withdraw from the dunya, the worldly life. We take this month to focus on our hereafter, to, to, to just focus on ibadat, on worship, on becoming better, uh, saving reward for the hereafter. Yeah. So, and yeah, that's the last topic. So, a short question. If you've spoken to me, you probably already know the answer. But what do you think the average attention span of Gen Z and millennials are? So I'm going to give you a few seconds to think about it, or you can pause and think about it. But I'm just saying ahead of time, it's much worse than you think. Most people that I ask this question, they're like, I think for Gen Z, it's 9 minutes and then maybe 20 minutes for millennial. This is what it actually is. For Gen X and boomers, it's estimated that it's much longer, but they in science, they don't yet have um, an answer to how much longer. But the average attention span for Gen Z is 8 seconds. For millennials, it's 12 seconds, which means nowadays, and trust me when I say that those big companies have psychologists working for them, they know that they need to capture your attention in 8 seconds, which means all those greedy billionaires out there are fighting for your attention. They are all in a race to grab those 8 seconds, to capture you within 8 seconds, which means that um, our dopamine system is pressured even more so because of this. It's not just the internet and notifications and having everything at our fingertips. It's also advertisers. Yes. All right. So our heads are full. That's what we're saying a lot in these times. Our heads are chaotic. In the book, one of my favorite books, by the way, Remembrance of the Most Merciful, Ibn al-Qayyim, also one of my favorite authors, he writes about, he makes an example, a metaphor of a person who's trying to read a book under a tree, but he keeps being bothered by birds. And he writes, you can get up and, wave at the birds and they will be gone for a few seconds. But if they keep coming back, then you'll have to cut down the tree. And the example that he's making here is that if in Western psychology, we would say if your head is full with the dunya, the worldly life, then you have to cut it at its root. Islamically, we would say the heart is full of the dunya. If you find yourself during prayer, during i'tikaf, which is it's the Arabic word for seclusion, it's something we do in the last 10 days of Ramadan. If you find yourself constantly drifting back to thoughts about work, about friends, about notifications, about things you're going to do, things you're going to have to clean, what you're going to eat, etc. It means that you have to cut down the tree and you have to remove those distractions from your life. And this is why Ramadan is also extremely important to make use of the seclusion. I remember about 2 years back when I came home from Tarawih. For those that don't know, that is the hour-long prayer that we do in the month of Ramadan that we look extremely forward to. And I remember walking home and I said to my husband, just aside from the blessing that it is to be able to pray this prayer, I said, I realize how protective it is for our brain because for 30 days, every day for an hour, you have this pure calm and focus. You're just standing and focusing on Allah, on the words that are recited. You don't think about anything else. And it's the opposite of what we're doing most of the day. We're being present in the moment and not just drifting everywhere with our racing thoughts. And then I said, come to think about it. Imagine how damaged the brain of people that never pray must be, because at least we have 5 times a day where for a few minutes we cut down the tree and we aren't bothered by the birds. And other people don't have that. So use this month as a reset for your brain, for your heart. So if you look at this picture, what kind of feeling does it give you? Think of this as our lives. And if I tell you now that there's one special block here, and that one special block is your focus for the next year, try to find it. I'll give you 8 seconds. 8 seconds have passed. So you probably weren't able to find it, but what if we do this? And then what if we do this? There's your goal. You wouldn't have found it. And this is what we're trying to do. We're trying to erase every single distraction. And then if you have a really, really good grasp on this, if you basically intuitively, your way to this goal, it's how do you say that? Oh my God, I'm losing all my words. It's basically wired into you. Then you can add another goal. But this is what we hope Ramadan does to us. It is our compass for the next year. So to answer the question of why are your symptoms worse during the first day of the Ramadan? The first is, of course, related to the unseen. A lot of people suffer with spiritual sickness. They have maybe sihr or a lot of ayn or hasad. To those that don't know these words, I would just uh, stick with spiritual sickness, things of the unseen. And if we increase our strength through worship, through prayer, etc., then they weaken. And if they weaken, then you start noticing them. That's why people who have possession, for example, respond to Quran being recited on them. It's because it hurts and weakens the jinn inside of them. And in Ramadan, of course, the strongest jinn are tied up. We are safe from them for a month, as long as Allah and as long as Allah protects us, of course. That's the first point. That is the more important thing. Hoyo, language. Okay, the first point is the unseen. The second point is dopamine is decreasing. Then we have blood sugar spiking, going down. Then we have cortisol. The stress hormone rises during the first few days because your body thinks you're starving. This is so lame. Okay, so this, I could have chosen any other picture that represents the body shifting from systems. So it switches from um, using sugar as fuel to using fat as fuel. It shifts from sympathetic to parasympathetic. And I assume a lot of medical shifts that I don't know about, but yeah, I had to, I had to make the dad joke. I bet nobody's. If you're laughing, you're lame. Okay, so then um, reflection, because we're alone more, we have less distractions. There is no food to give us dopamine and emotional comfort. Um, yeah, so that also causes an increase of symptoms similar to COVID. You know, during the lockdown, when everyone basically symptoms rocketed, yeah, skyrocketed, whatever. And the last reason is that the suffering is purgatory. Uh, I put the rose because of the narration where the Prophet, peace be upon him, said that not even the prick of the thorn of a rose hurts a Muslim without his sins being erased for it. So whenever we suffer, our sins are erased. And there's also a narration where the Prophet has explained to us that if Allah wants a servant to reach a high rank, and this person cannot reach it through his deeds, then he puts difficulties in the life of this person, which will raise him to that status. So, of course, we struggle during Ramadan, but hopefully, inshallah, it will be a blessed suffering. So, here I have it written down if you want to read the summary. And then we've come to the conclusion, and I've done it within an hour. Oh my God, I'm so proud of myself. Heal the body. If you heal the heart, then you heal the brain, then you heal the body. Basically, this picture. And then I wrote a reason to a means. In Arabic, we use the word sabab, which means a, a reason to a means. Um, I want to remember everyone that everything that we do when we strive to seek healing is just a sabab. We are not in charge of sickness and healing. Allah is in charge of that. And whatever we do, we just try to fulfill our part, which is the effort. But it is not the effort that heals us. In the end, it's Allah that heals us. And we're just trying to prove that I don't want to say we are worthy of. I'm not sure if I can say that we are worthy of healing. Anyway, we're just trying to do our best in front of Allah in order that He may heal us quicker. And you know, nowadays we the problem of today is that there is so much information out there, and it depends on where you go, where the answer will always be different. Someone will say you have to do A, someone will say you have to take pill B, someone will say it's mental, the other will say it's physical, the other will say it's spiritual. In the end, Allah chooses where our healing lies. And it can come through us through a pill, through ruqya, through reading Quran, through it can Allah can also decide to just remove the calamity for us. And also we can do all the right things at the same time, be super healthy, read Quran every day, and we can still Allah can decide to test us with diseases or difficulty or trouble or being bothered by the shayateen, etc. So don't stress on that. Just try to have a good Ramadan and ask for healing. And then when a means comes on your path, so Allah brings the sabab on your path, then don't feel elevated above it. Because a lot of healing is blocked by people because they don't accept the sabab that is presented to them. Someone may say to them, you know, you have possession, and they feel that they are above that. They're like, no, I'm not possessed. I have psychological issues. Some people will do the opposite. I don't have psychological issues. I just need to improve my ibadat, which is always a good thing, but maybe that's not where your cure lies. So long story short, I don't know why I'm drifting again. Probably going to just cut this part out. Long story short, remember that everything is just a sabab. It's just a means. Eventually, Allah decides, and He's able to heal us through different forms. And also, He's the only one who knows what the best method of healing for us is. So focus on purifying your heart and improving yourself. Uh, Secluding Allah in worship, worshiping Him alone, asking Him alone, and then expect the best of Him. Then yeah, well, there's no questions because this isn't a live session. But anyway, you can put them in the questions, and goodbye. Sorry for making you suffer through this talk.